All right, we're gonna start this up. Make sure I can be heard, and I can. So that's what you get when you got a one-man band. Someone's got to run the computers, run the audio, run the video, run the intellectual stuff. I pull it off and I make it look good. Crazy, I know. I mean, not the production. I mean, I look good. I mean, look at this. There's no. I'm pointing at the screen. Like you can't even tell there's a green screen back there, but there like totally is. See it? It's amazing. Anyway, enough of that stuff. Today we're going to have a conversation about um, a pretty difficult topic that many people. The topic itself is, in short, euthanasia in Germany. But the application continues to be with us because uh, people continue to die. They're born, they live, they die, and sometimes there's suffering involved. And so um, every day there's new reason to consider these things. And whenever we do, we have to confront ourselves with the reality that there was a time in history, more than one actually, but we'll get to that. There was a time in history when it went way bad, super, super bad. And I'm going to lead off giving a kind of an overview of that. And then we'll bring my guest in, Pastor Terry Hollifield, who's waiting in the wings, ready to jump in and pick up the baton and run with it. But we'll get to that. So the book that you see there, I have it in my hands also. Let me make the cover just a little bit bigger for you. So there's some interesting things about this book. It was published about 1920. Uh, Carl Binding was the was kind of a prominent doctor. Excuse me. And Alfred Hoche was a psychiatrist, I think. So I guess also a doctor from that point of view. May have may have gotten their credentials a little mixed up. At any rate, Binding for sure was a very well known, credible voice in post World War One Germany. And in post World War One Germany, they had a problem. If you recall, you had the Versailles Treaty, and you had an economy in ruins. You had a lot of wounded, still needed care, and you had a lot of people in asylums and whatnot. And that was all state sponsored. And there was a question about what the value of even keeping those people alive. You can't even hear me, see my face now. It's kind of disconcerting for me, at least. So this book was it's not very long, but it had disproportionate influence on the conversation, which was already well underway about whether or not it was right for the state to kill the people who were a burden on the state. And they produce a variety of arguments. They say things like, they do the math, if for every 30 invalids you could support, one growing family, stuff like that. Um, and they explicitly make the argument very explicitly, but basically saying, we're just animals, and what do you do when a animal is old and suffering? Every good farmer knows that you put it out of its suffering and you take the burden off the farm. I'm paraphrasing. Um, and this was widely um, it was in the bloodstream in Germany, and not just in Germany, actually. In fact, I want to bring up just a quote that I have ready to go here. Let's see here. Now I just got to make it so you guys can see it. So I own and operate a website called eugenicsarchive.com, and these quotes are on this site here. I'm just going to give you one. Again, just to show you that it's in the bloodstream, as it were. So the author Virginia Woolf talking about a long line of imbeciles. The first was a very tall young man. I'm right here if you're not just queer enough to look at twice, but no more. The second shuffled and looked aside. Then when one realized that everyone in that long line was a miserable, ineffective, shuffling, idiotic creature with no forehead or no chin and an imbecile grin or a wild, suspicious stare. It was perfectly horrible. They should certainly be killed. Helen Keller, yeah, she made kind of the same arguments. Actually, you can go to Eugenics Archive, go up to the top, go quotes by topic, scroll down to lethal chambers, an American and British idea. Yeah, it was. So one of the I have two sources that I'm one main source that I'm pulling for this episode tonight. Um, Death and Deliverance by Michael Burley. Euthanasia in Germany, 1900 to 1945. If you want to find out more about just the German experience of euthanasia, this book is fairly comprehensive, and I augmented some of my thoughts, although we'll see what actually, if we ever get to them, with this one, Merciful Release, The History of the British Euthanasia Movement. And the reason why I pulled this one out is because we like to look at what happened in Germany as a uniquely horrible thing, and obviously it was. But to to ignore the fact that there were people in America and in Britain and in elsewhere who were making the exact same arguments, literally the same arguments. Like it costs $30 to feed 400 people. We could use that money to feed 500 families. Whatever calculation. And they were all saying that basically the people in question were not really human anyway. So what's the problem? Or that they had ceased to have humanity. Uh, I I was very tempted to just bring out tons of like quotes, and it becomes overwhelming. But let me just give you this basic fact. In 1939, Hitler authorized the extermination of incurable children, and so this is before any of the major other horrors unfolded. You did not have the final solution. You didn't even have the T4 project, which I'll say a little bit more about in a minute. Um, he started first with children and German children. Obviously, if you were a black child or a Jewish child, who was a mental patient, you were in even more trouble. But the German children were not spared. So before the Germans turned their enterprise into a racial thing, it was simply applied science from their point of view. And they started with the children. So this led to something called what was later called the Action T4 project, because the headquarters of it was on the name of a street that the Americans couldn't pronounce. It started with the T, so T4. Um, and the people who carried out the T4 project would end up murdering anywhere between 200,000 and 400,000 people in these mental asylums, or they're not even necessarily called all of them asylums, but they're just, the wards where they would send the old people to be taken care of, and things of that sense. Oh, almost a 500,000 people, most of them Germans, many of them even war heroes from World War One. Again, it was just applied science. And then when things went really bad for Germany, and they ended up losing, and they were put on trial, how did they justify their actions? Well, some of them actually invoked what was being said in America and England, saying, "Hey, what we did was no different." But many of them also invoked this book here, allowing the destruction of life unworthy of life by prominent experts. It was sort of a form of, I was just following orders, but in this case, it was the orders of the bioethicist, right? The scientists say so. They say we ought to do it, and it's good and proper to do it. So we should just do it. Now I'm gonna bring in our guest here in just a moment, but it's also worth mentioning that this particular edition is one that I authorized the translation of myself back around 2010, when I began studying this and researching this, the all of it. Um, I should mention, because I have a daughter who was born with a birth defect, and the very day that, like, within an hour ish of being told that she had the birth defect, the doctor said, "Well, do you want to kill it?" And I was just floored by that at the time, and I wanted to understand how and why. And so that was like my path into this. And by the way, my daughter is alive and well. Um, talk about that some other time. But I had this book kept coming up as influential among the euthanasia advocates in Germany and elsewhere, but you couldn't find it. I was finally able to turn over a roughly created quick version that some academic had thrown together, and it was circulating more or less like an email. And but it wasn't even out in. I couldn't find it. In fact, if there is another English edition, even now, I'm not aware of it. So I commissioned Dr. Christina Modak. Her name's on here, who is a native German speaker, to translate this, and we got this available in English print. So one of the things that I'm proud of is to take my experience and give people a research tool that they can continue to use. It's very important that we understand these things so that we don't repeat them, and it would be so foolish to ever think that we could never repeat them. So that's my little monologue. Uh, I'm going to bring in my guest here, just as a reminder as I get him moving here. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that jazz. Make sure that you share this. We do these podcasts every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. Okay, so Pastor Terry Hollifield has a lot to say about this, and there he is. Welcome.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah. So what's your opening salvo? What are your what's on your mind?
Well, I didn't tell you about this. You don't know this about me, but you were talking about your daughter.
Yeah.
I was recommended to be killed on the other side of the womb, so I was really premature
Okay.
uh, and was predicted to be born with lots of difficulties, and I was born with some difficulties, but the my doctor's or my mother's doctor came to her and said, you should probably let us take the baby.
Mm,
And her response was, take him. What do you mean take him? Well,
right.
obviously he meant kill me. you
Yeah.
know. So this topic of the value of humanity, the dignity of humanity, hits close to home for me. personally as well as it does for
Yeah.
you. So I
Yeah.
hadn't told you that about me,
No. No, you
but
hadn't.
yeah, yeah,
Well, I'm glad. So yeah, it's the it is often the personal um, events that bring people in. I had been what people would consider me to be pro life. I was pro life even when I was not a Christian. Um, back in the 1994, 95 or whatever.
yeah.
But I wasn't pro life until
Mm,
I was in the room with the doctor who gave us the live option. You know, hey, this is the you can do
yeah.
this. The state's going to be all right with it, and everyone's going to understand. After that, then I was pro life. Then it was
Mm,
personal.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. Yeah, yeah. It's amazing. Yeah, I try not to come arrive at my decisions and my views emotionally.
Yeah.
But it can spark investigation into why you think the things that you do and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Yeah, good.
Yeah. So, um, I think you took some time to look into the T4 project. Now, another
Yes.
irony is I did not know about the T4 project until one of my authors that I published, Derek Elkins, submitted a novel for our contest with the title "Life Unworthy of Life." And I don't remember
Mm,
exactly what year that would have been, uh, but it was almost embarrassing that had not heard about it because I kind of study Holocaust
mm,
in mass murder. I have shelves, which of course you can't see, everything from the rape of Nanking to Rwanda over there because I want so much to, and I for a long time, since 9/11, I would say, to understand what motivates people to do mass evil in that way, and
mm,
yet I had never heard about this time where before the Holocaust, where first they killed
yeah.
German disabled people. And
Hmm.
I think it's because people don't actually think it's that bad. What do you What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And thinking it's that bad really comes down to uh, how we derive our morality.
Yeah,
Where do we get our personal and then our collective ethics from? It's interesting in that when I was looking into the T4 project, it was saying that um, people were sort of selected by doctors using questionnaires
yeah,
to assess the health and productivity of
right,
people,
yeah,
oftentimes even without examining the patients,
right,
um, yeah,
right,
which was astounding to me.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I wrote a little note down, and I said, if God is removed, then practicality rules, and that's what's practical for the survival of the fittest, of the human fittest, right? And so
yeah,
really, along with the rest of nature, so to speak, humanity itself becomes red in tooth and claw,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It comes down to what is man, and if we are meat machines, as it were, then we can be reconsumed back into the machine for reasons of non-productivity
right,
and leaving resources for others and
right,
that sort of thing. It's an incredible cliff to fall off of ideologically.
right. So I mentioned that one of my sources for tonight is this book here, um, Burley Burley. I don't actually. It's in English, so I obviously can't pronounce it. Um, like England English could mean anything. He does a really good job, as far as I can tell, and I don't know this for a fact, but I think he's an atheist, and I think he's a liberal. But he's very transparent and open about the fact that in the 1910s to 30s or whatever, that Germany more or less abandoned its Christian worldview, and
Mm-hmm.
even the people who went to church didn't really believe a lot of it, or it was being radically reinterpreted. Um, and he talks about a rebuttal. This is interesting. There was a rebuttal to this book by a guy named Meltzer, I think, and this guy took he did not like it. He thought it was basically a barbaric argument, but he went and he did a poll of all the people who came to the asylum that he managed, like 200 of them, and the majority of the parents and loved ones of the people in the asylum were like, "No, I'd be okay if you like killed them."
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, and then
Wow.
it was a hypothetical, like no one was thinking that it was ever going to happen. I think this was like
Right.
a 1925 rebuttal or something like that. Um, and then he took the time to also break it down by by religion. And if I understand what Burley was saying correctly, the only people who sort of uniformly opposed this whole idea were the Catholics.
Mm.
Even,
Yeah. This is.
yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, uh, even the ones who were going to the Protestant churches that nominally still believed, still were prepared to say they're suffering, they're a burden on the state, get rid of them, which was a crazy figure to hear.
Wow. Wow. And it's kind of the opposite of really the biblical view of suffering and of helping others through suffering and that sort of thing. It is not the biblical view to kill the person. You know, I'm too burdened by these people, or the state is too burdened, or they are burdensome to themselves.
Yeah,
You
right.
know, the biblical worldview would say quite a few different things about suffering. So it's weird how that crept into even the Protestant church. But it's interesting that these issues of human dignity, um, including things like slavery and things like that, began to be overturned by Christians.
Yeah,
Right, we're the reason. Christians are the reason that slavery is unacceptable in the West presently. Thank God for now, at least, or slavery of certain kinds, I should say,
yeah,
are unacceptable in the West. Um, but like you said, once we become unmoored by those precepts, so to speak, we think that radical human autonomy would result in something like anarchy, but it does not. It results in totalitarianism
right. Yeah,
by the state, which is
yeah,
what we're talking about.
right.
Yeah.
And I think that um, I wasn't sure if I wanted to share some of these quotes because there's just so many that it could overwhelm us. But that worldview aspect. So on the same link, I'm gonna make us smaller here so I can
Yeah.
show people this.
The smaller you make me, the better I look.
I have no comment on that. I guess we'll just get rid of us completely.
Yeah, all
So
good.
so like my I have my doctorate. My dissertation was on evolutionary ethics. I don't think you know that. Um, Specifically on Darwinian ethics, um, by Herbert Spencer and those. So that's how I got into the eugenics stuff. But there is this. Where to go? So this section here. Oh, I keep grabbing the wrong thing. So this book here, Civic Biology, 1914. This is an American textbook that's being referenced here, and
Mm-hmm.
this is the actual textbook that was disputed in the Scopes Monkey trial.
Okay.
So this is what high school kids were being taught in their schools under the official in their biology book.
I
But
see families becoming parasitic on society in here.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Man.
So this paragraph is about these asylums, right? Um, I we can read it all, but these people are parasitic. They not only do harm to others by corrupting, stealing, or spreading diseases, but they're actually, like, this is terrible, right? Actually protected and cared for by the state out of public money. Largely for them, the poorhouse and the asylum exist. They take from society but give nothing in return. They are true parasites. And then the
Mm.
remedy: if the people were lower animals, we would just kill them,
Oh, wow.
right? So they go.
Wow.
He goes on. I love this statement right here. Remedies of this sort have been tried successfully in Europe and are now meeting with success in our country. Um,
Wow.
but there was one. Where is he? Barry is down here a little bit. So in England, this guy here was a prominent British advocate. And what I want to call attention to here is, first of all, he takes aim at the whole idea of the sanctity of life. Um, he says that section
Mm.
there. I do not share your views as to the sanctity of human life or the almost insuperable legal and practical difficulties which a lethal chamber would involve. And then he goes on to basically call Christians hypocrites for that. But he rejects this. This is in 1930 in England, by the way.
Yeah.
But in light of what you said about worldview, though, so here's what he says here in this paragraph. He appeals directly to evolution. Everyone must conform, whether he wills it or not, to the great laws of nature, the law of self-preservation and the law of the reproduction of species, and nature takes no risk in her ample provision for both.
Mm.
So he's basing his notion on Darwinism, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean I feel like I know. In fact, I know I could just keep on going, but the in all these cases, what happened when they got rid of God, they they did not go to anarchy, like you said, like you just said, but they created a new God,
Yes. Yes.
which they called the state,
Yes.
and that's explicitly an argument made by Binding and Hoche that the state is now it's like its own organism, and as being an organism in its own right, it has its own right to self-preservation. And
Mm.
just like our bodies get rid of noxious cells and bad stuff, and we eat, and the stuff that we can't use goes out one end, you know, the state has every right and prerogative to do the same. And
Mm.
so that's why when they were going through the selection process and looking for people who could work, that's why that was such an important component to their thinking, was because if you were not contributing to society, you were literally excrement and
Yeah.
should be treated as such. And I saw a quote today where the actual word refuse was used, human refuse, and I
Mm.
decided not to pull it up. But like, it's like we're not. I don't want people to think that I'm exaggerating here. These are like their actual words expressed in their actual beliefs.
Yeah, and people should recognize, Anthony, this may be a curveball. I hope not. But this type of sentiment can take place on the right or the left of the political spectrum,
Yeah, sure.
right? This is politics neutral. You know, I mentioned to you sort of offline or prior to the podcast. I tend to think of worldview like a tree, and at the bottom of that we have theology and philosophy down in the roots and the dirt. Um, and then everything else from the trunk to the branches to the leaves is all shaped by what's at the roots and the
Yep.
dirt,
Yep.
and so anthropology, how we view humanity, is just up from philosophy and theology,
Yep.
right? And so these are two paths diverged in a wood, so to speak, right?
Right.
Views on humanity. I noticed in that last quote that you had up there was the capital N for nature.
Yes. Yes.
Nature is capitalized. Something has to be capitalized, right? Like it's going to be nature and or the state or God. One thing that I think our founders here in the U.S. got right is that our rights are endowed by the Creator, right?
Mm,
They are thus unalienable or unalienable. So, yeah, I think I mean if the state determines what a person is,
yeah,
whether there's a difference between a human and a person, or to use the slavery example again, whether this person is a full person and then this person is 3/5 of a man,
yeah, right,
we're in trouble.
yeah,
We're in trouble.
yeah. So my eyes fell on the quote. It was by the same in the same article, the letter to the editor by Barry, where he talks about um, how much money they're spending per year on human refuse,
Wow.
which is a yeah.
Wow.
Um, so the T4 project, some of the other things that are interesting about it that are at least worth talking about because it they may come up in different ways is the Germans in 1938 did not know how to do mass exterminations of people yet, and so the whole T4 project was an experiment in mass killing and mass disposal also. And there's a couple things that are interesting about it. First, it was a secret. The,
Right. There's a cover up there.
yeah,
Yeah.
they did, even though they had the belief that, probably correctly, that the majority of the German people were not going to cause too much of a fuss. The the individuals directly affected certainly could,
Yeah.
right? Because and they were their neighbors, right? And
Right.
this is
Yeah.
the war is just getting ready to start. Um, and at the height of the T4 project, the war was underway, and so they politically couldn't just be transparent about what was happening. So they not only did they the doctors select people based on without ever seeing them, but they would make up causes of death and actually send
Yeah.
letters to the parents and the family.
I
You know,
read that.
it
Yeah.
was just crazy. And people would get like urns of ashes if they requested them, and it'd be like it'd be like ridiculous things would happen. Like they'd find an earring in the ashes of a man.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so the bureaucracy always screws it up. they
Right.
like people
Yeah.
started to like figure it out.
Mm.
So it kind of famously came to an end by Archbishop Galen, I think, was the catalyst. But this is where I
Mm-hmm.
was kind of going with this is that they didn't. My take on it was they didn't actually end it. Instead, they decided they had bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
And so they took the technology, the the shower rooms that were hidden, and the gases and stuff, and then they took all the actual people from the T4 project and they moved them to the concentration camps. And so I think it's, I mean, I don't know what kind of like plot twist that is in history that
Yeah.
the Holocaust itself was mechanically initiated by first by the killing
Mm-hmm.
of disabled people. Like
Mm-hmm.
disabled people are always on the front lines of
Yeah.
this. Is kind of where
Yeah.
I'm going with this. Like
And it started with children too, right? With the T4
yes,
project.
yeah,
Yes.
they always start with the weak and then they work their way
Mm-hmm.
up, and it never.
Yeah.
It just seems to be the trajectory that it's
Yeah.
history always takes.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if you have, if it's the fit adults
Yeah,
who can contribute the most to society and are the most likely to fight back and are able to fight back and defend themselves, like you said, go for the weak,
yeah,
who cost resources, who aren't seen as valuable in a utilitarian society. Yeah, it's nefarious,
Yeah.
truly,
Right.
to go
So
after the weakest, the most defenseless.
yeah.
Yeah.
So at some point here, we're gonna definitely end up talking about like the the realities of what can you do if you don't want to be a mass murderer. Like how far do you go to keep someone alive? Things, questions of
Mm,
that sort. So we'll come to that. But I'm saying it now because I can see that someone watching this later might say, well, it's all well and good to say that you value life, but what about this scenario? What about that
sure.
scenario? And I think some of that is is reasonable, at least to ask, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
at least
Sure.
needs to be wrestled with. So I don't want to be dismissive of that. But on the other hand, from my own experience, um, when we first found out about our daughter, I mean, we knew like nothing about spina bifida. That's what she has, right? Like zero, and we only had about 1 hour between the time when she was diagnosed and the time when we were sitting in front of that doctor to
Wow.
find out.
Wow. Yeah.
We went home. We made arrangements for our other kids, and we got on to the greatest source of information known to man at the time, Google, and that was the extent of our of what we knew. And with that vulnerable, we were so. In other words, we were in this extremely vulnerable position, and if had not taken the time to know what we believed before we went into that room,
Hmm.
it would have been very easy for that to have gone a different way, right? And so,
Yeah.
you have to figure this stuff out in advance because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. But also, a lot of times, the horror stories of your imagination don't actually come true. You don't. Yes, there is a worst case scenario, but the worst case scenario isn't all. It's not inevitable either. And so, like, we did
Mm-hmm.
not have the worst case scenario. But there's a maxim out there about how you don't make law from the worst case. I forget
That's right.
I forget exactly how it's framed or whatnot, but you know what I'm talking about.
Right. I don't know the Latin of it, but
Yeah,
yes, I know. I know. Yeah.
and I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. But I think that if
Yeah.
people don't think these things through, it's very easy to make all of your judgments based on
Yes.
a worst case scenario, even one that isn't even being presented yet and might not ever.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 I would agree. The Interestingly, this specific aspect of this topic that you're talking about now, my investigation into it began for on personal reasons as well. I was thrust into a family situation where I had an aunt who had a traumatic brain injury. She fell, hit her head in the bathroom, and had a massive dent in her brain.
Hmm.
And we rushed to the hospital, whatever. I'm like the pastor in the family, so people are looking at
Yeah.
me to help direct, and I had no idea. I was like 30 at the time.
Hmm.
And obviously that's been a few years ago. Um, but the doctor came in using vernacular that I was unfamiliar with. I'm sure the same thing happened with you in your situation, but he kept using this phrase. Her name is Joyce. Joyce has reached the condition that we would call uh, brain death,
Hmm.
and there's the specific phrasing, the condition we call brain death. And I thought, why didn't he just say she's dead?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it began to click in my mind that he didn't say that because she's not
Yeah.
dead.
Right.
Uh, which is,
Yeah.
I know, is a very sensitive topic,
Yeah.
and as a pastor, I've had to navigate that very carefully and sensitively with many families, sadly. And so I know that I know the various perspectives on that, and um, and in many ways, there are very valid perspectives that can differ um,
Yeah.
on it. But yeah, I'm prepared to talk about that, if you want, but we don't have to go down that road either.
Oh, I think it's kind of inevitable that we will. But
Yeah.
um, so to kind of move things along here a little bit, I've been telling the kind of the story of the T4 project and how it unfolded. Um, After the war, they found out first the Americans and the Russians, they were able to ascertain about 70,000 from the records that they turned up that had been killed in this way. And what was it? One of the interesting things is that the T4 project actually continued unofficially, but instead of
Mm.
gassing, they switched to not feeding them. Uh, um,
Yeah.
but not
Yeah.
all at once, because that would be too
Right.
noticeable. Just sort of gradually removing
Mm.
the food until they basically just died on their own. So thousands died that way too, and I don't know if
Yeah.
the records capture that. And then based on that 70,000, they had what was called the Nuremberg doctors trials, and that's where the main people like I think Brandt. Well, I know the last name was Brandt. Karl Brandt, I think, was his name. He was like the one that Hitler dispatched
Mm.
to launch this thing. Um, he was hung, um, but just based on that 70,000. But
Mm.
apparently, after the reunification of Germany in the 90s, then the records from East Germany were brought out, and that added almost 300,000.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
when you include not so East Germany, West Germany, Poland, and the other places. So that's just a lot of disabled people that were tallied up in this. So then there was just again kind of continuing the historical narrative of it. Um, Understandably, then from like 48 to 1960, give or take, there wasn't a whole lot of talk about euthanasia anymore. You know,
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
yeah, the eugenics crowd went really really quiet.
Mm.
Um, and I've tracked that. I've studied that transition also. Um, but then after enough time had kind of gone by, it came up again, and it's kind of still with us today.
Mm.
Uh, and a lot of the arguments are still the same because the underlying worldviews are still the same.
That's right.
So
That's right.
inevitably, because you've got the same worldviews, the same logic emerges. The only difference that I can tell between the logic of the 1930 euthanasia advocates, all of them, not just the German ones, but like including the British and the American ones as well, and the euthanasia advocates of today, is the ones in 1930 were very very comfortable putting it in Darwinian terms,
Mm-hmm.
whereas
Mm-hmm.
whereas today, even if that's what they believe, and I'm not sure they always know that's why they have that belief,
Right. Right.
they would never say it,
Right.
even if it's the exact same argument. They would.
Right.
So that's the only thing that seems to be different between the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing. Obviously, the problem with Germany is they had that weird racial component that
Right.
obviously is a historical reality. That so that
Mm-hmm.
that brings us to today when in Canada they've brought
Yes.
it's medically assisted suicide is going on, and in England they're right now in the process of passing a law that will make it legal. And of course, there's been other European countries that have already kind of gone the way, in certain American states too.
Right. You can order these pods to be shipped to your house, and you can
Yeah.
press the button, and we've already heard horror stories come out of those. But yeah, the premise is wicked in itself.
Right.
Yeah.
So here's a thought problem for you. So, and this is a loaded one. Okay.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Okay. Let's say you had the opportunity. Let's say that our federal government was considering passing a law that would make euthanasia legal,
Okay.
and you had the opportunity to go and talk to each elected official, both in the House and the Senate. What would you make plain the connection of the euthanasia movement to what happened in Nazi Germany, or would you just focus on something else?
No, I think I think if you you must show the fruit that's come from that tree in the past. I believe. I think the Nazi Germany thing. Um,
I mean, basically, you're calling them or accusing them of potentially being like the Nazis. So let's,
yeah, I'm not saying they have Nazi ideology. I'm just saying they would participate in a practice that the Nazis participated in from the same root belief that human dignity is something to be determined by the state.
yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
think I think we don't even necessarily have to bring in the Darwinian aspect. Excuse me, the the Nazi aspect, because we could
Hmm.
focus on the Americans and the British advocates who were still
Hmm.
using Darwinian arguments. So we don't even
Hmm.
necessarily have to cite the German T4 project
I
to
hear that.
in
Yeah.
order to get to the um, the
Hmm.
Darwinian angle. And maybe that's
Well,
actually, yeah. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, didn't Hitler give Mussolini a copy of The Origin of Species as a gift?
I don't know if it, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I have that floating in my head. I'll need to verify that, but I seem to have that floating in my head. But yeah, it's certainly survival of the fittest.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
wouldn't it be?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in this kind of in the spirit of that question, I wanted to talk about some of the more modern developments, and I
Hmm.
want to talk about this article that I sent you, afterbirth abortion.
Yeah.
Is that one that you had heard of before I mentioned it?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm familiar with. I think I told you. I was sure that Peter Singer would be referenced in there
Yeah,
somewhere.
right.
He seems to be the loudest voice for that, and uh, he he's a
Yeah,
pretty awful guy.
right.
But yeah, I knew he was going to show up in there. But yeah, I've heard that term, and let's be honest, Anthony. At least they are consistent.
Right, sure.
I
Yep.
mean, I have to applaud the consistency here of the willingness to say the quiet part out loud.
Yeah, yeah,
You know.
right. I think actually I'm gonna come back to this. I think I want to talk about what is happening in Canada and what did happen in the UK first.
Hmm.
So here's in Canada, the uh, the I believe the 2023 numbers are out, and 1 in 20 people in Canada are dying from medically assisted suicide.
That's a stunning statistic.
Yeah, and so you can see from this progression. This is from Canada's own numbers here. Um, it's just going up and up and up. And with it, I'll just set this to the side. With it are all of the problems that the horror stories that don't get the same kind of media attention. Like you hear the horror stories of, well, this guy was in an accident. He's in a vegetative state or whatever. What you don't hear about is the uh, the 21-year-old whose boyfriend broke up with her, and
Right.
she's feeling terrible about it. She doesn't want to live, and she goes in and says, "Hey, I hear this is legal. I just want to end it."
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and we know things like that are happening.
Oh, without question.
Yeah.
Sure.
We also don't hear about the cases where, um, and we, if I don't, we're only ever going to hear rumors of this because of the nature of it, but we don't hear about how, you know, uh, Grandpa he has no, he's not doing really great. He's missing his wife, but also Grandpa has a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
and he could spend that money on continuing his care and probably live another 5 years. But the grandkids are like, "Well, Grandpa, you know, you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be a burden on, and then, oh yeah, right." And so you have this opportunity for people who do not have the best scenario, good faith scenario. Like, we're not talking about people in a vegetative state. We're talking about a perfectly sane guy who's having health problems, but who has a lot of money and a family that wants it. That
Right, or a society that wants it to be given to charitable organizations or what
or
have you.
or if there's an inheritance tax, right?
Right, right,
Yeah,
sure,
right.
yeah.
So we know this is going on in Canada. I wanted to talk about the Liverpool care pathway,
Mm-hmm.
which I have on this window here, which apparently is so big it obscures us once again. No, neither of us really care, I guess.
That doesn't bother me. So
So,
your viewers may want to see you.
no, I'm pretty sure not. Uh, so far, I know most of my viewers in person, and they're glad when I cover my face. Their only wish is that I had more guests and I never spoke.
Oh.
So that would be my wife, actually. But um, so the Liverpool care pathway is a really, really interesting thing. So this is in I forget exactly the year that it started. Um, 2005, maybe 2006. Uh, so it was there for about 10 years, and
I thought it was in the even earlier, maybe the 90s.
I'm not sure. Does the article say
You would certainly know more than I would on it, so we'll roll with that.
late 1990s? Here it is.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, so this particular article is has the controversial question. So this is over, but is it still happening? So it ended in like 2013 and 14, but 10 years later, there are still reports of people going into end of life care who have no reason. There's no reason for them to be so.
Mm.
Um, they go in, have a surgery for something else, and then not too long after that, they're dead. It's like what,
Mm-hmm.
what happened? It's kind of unexpected. Um, so what's interesting about this, I don't. I have to see us here. Oh, but you don't want to be seen. I'll put this over here. Um,
Doesn't bother me.
so the National Health Service in the UK, that's like their like the English people are super proud of it. Like this is one of their shining jewels of their. I don't know if we want to call it socialist state or not. I don't know if they would call it that, but it's certainly a shining jewel of what they think that they've accomplished over there. Everyone gets free health care, right? They can never afford to pay for it. They're always in debt, just like we are.
Mm-hmm.
But it's free, so if you want to believe that. And so nominally, what happened was they said we have this technology and people are living a lot longer, but sometimes there's just no hope for recovery, or the people are
Mm-hmm.
suffering, um, and we need a procedure, a protocol for making these people comfortable, which on the face of it, on that alone, okay, that sounds all right. But it quickly, I don't know if quickly is the right word. It began to unfold that people were dying, that they were put on this pathway without the family being even notified.
Mm-hmm.
And there were even aspects of conversations among the medical establishment that basically said you don't want to tell the family anyway because they're not going to understand. It's just sort of above and beyond what they can
So
comprehend.
elitist. Yeah.
I know, pretty crazy kind of stuff, and I don't know how well that was ever like nailed down. There was a major
Mm-hmm.
report that was issued, which I admit that I didn't read, but just from reading this over the years, these are the stories that emerged, and there was a lot of people who so they had this one criteria. It was a four-part criteria. I think this article might actually have it here. Um, they had to meet two of these four. They had to be either bedbound, semi-comatose, only able to take sips of fluid, and no longer able to take tablets. But the problem is that after they were put on some of these medications,
Mm-hmm.
they they would become they. How about that? They became semi-comatose,
Right.
and they
Right.
didn't seem to be very conversant. And so they
Mm-hmm.
basically, a lot of these people actually were like basically starving to death,
Yes.
which I don't know about you, sounds an awful lot like what happened when the T4 project halted,
Yes.
right?
Yep. Well, I'm sorry, my camera's having a little. Let's see if I can get it to focus here.
Yeah.
Maybe not. We'll see. Um, Again, I look better blurry. Anyway, I read there was a Daily Mail article in 2015 that even warned doctors, warned that doctors were still following LCP practices because they had just developed those habits
Right.
over
Yeah.
time. That's just how their treatment protocols happened. Yeah, I'm sorry about my camera. I don't know why that's
It's very unprofessional.
happened. It is,
I don't know if
and
I'll be
I
able to have you back with that kind of
and
thing.
I am unprofessional, clearly.
Go on. Go on.
Anyway, I was just saying that even if doctors aren't using that label, if they're operating from the same premises, and like you said, sometimes it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it?
Yeah.
We give these treatments, but they lead to the other criteria by which we
Right.
call this person unworthy of life, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So now that I've covered that, we can always come back to it if you want. Now I'm going to go to the after birth abortion thing.
Okay. I'm going to work on my camera. I'm just going to have to be blurry, it seems.
And I have a reason for this progression.
Okay.
So if viewers don't know, there was a journal article that was put out 2000. I have it here. I'll just look. 2012, February 23rd, 2012, and the title of the journal article, so published in a professional journal, was "After Birth Abortion: Why Should the Baby Live?" Okay, so there's a lot of things I don't like about this article, and as you mentioned, Peter Singer comes up in it. But there's this paragraph here that I have highlighted. I wanna talk about. So they are making the point, or they're countering the objection, as you see it above, um, that some of the people who have Down syndrome children, they're not miserable. That last sentence
Right.
you see right there. Many other severe disabilities are often reported to be happy. So it's not about suffering, like in this scenarios that they're talking about. And I think that's one of the unfair things that they try to throw at you is, oh, we care about the suffering and stuff. Do you, or is that what you're just trying to get me to your side on? Because
Right.
then we go into we go to the journals and we're hearing this stuff. So anyway, this is the argument that they make then in the highlighted thing. So, yeah, some of them could be happy. Nonetheless, to bring up such children might be an unbearable burden on the family and on society as a whole when the state economically provides for their care. When the state economically provides for their care. On these grounds, the fact that a fetus has the potential to become a person will have and who will have at least an acceptable life is no reason for prohibiting abortion. Therefore, we argue that when circumstances occur after birth, they don't give us an age. How, like,
Right, right.
uh, when my 20-year-old son comes back, I'm going to have to tell him, I mean, I'm sorry, I can't keep paying for your college because
You are a burden on the state of the Horvath
that's
home,
right.
right? Yeah.
You might be happy, but it's just not enough, buddy. Anyway, when it occurs after birth, such as it would have justified abortion, what we call afterbirth abortion should be permissible by law, right? So here's kind of the departure I think that I for our other rest of our conversation. That the key phrase in this and all the other thing, the Canadian example that we gave, uh, the Liverpool care pathway, and of course what happened in Germany, is it's all framed from the point of view of when the state economically provides for their care. And I'm going to maintain that it does not matter how good and noble you think your system is, how gleaming a jewel in socialist society is to have the NHS, or how compassionate you think you are for your Canadian care, whatever your rationale is. When the state is paying for it, when taxpayers are paying for it, it introduces into it a calculus that inevitably, like with the gravitational pull of the sun itself, pulls people towards an analysis that begins to look at people in terms of, well, if we pay $1,000 for this guy who only has 6 months to live,
Mm-hmm.
that is $1,000 we can't use to for 10 newborns, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And there was a passage in this book again here that talked about one of the ways that they tried to, the people who were trying to resist the T4 project, one of the ways that the people who were trying to save lives attempted to do so was by trying to say this person isn't paid by the state. This
Mm.
guy, he's supported by private funds, but of course it didn't work. But
Yeah.
because once this monster gets unleashed, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think you can put it back until it's been thoroughly dispatched. It's a beast that just roams and
Yeah.
ravages and can't be stopped.
Mm-hmm.
So my takeaway personally, because we're gonna segue here real soon into, well, what do we do about these real life hard situations? But my position is the state just can't be involved in it. Like certainly from a financial point of view, there should be no connection whatsoever, and it's going to create all sorts of problems. I realize, how do you afford it, and all this other stuff, but it's the only way I can see to sever that link and make it actually about the patient and not about the social organism of the state.
Yeah. Actuary tables and whatnot.
Yeah, right. So, all right. So, go ahead and respond to that.
Well, yeah, there's a lot in there, but I think it comes down to if you have that previous article, if you could pull it up, there's a section in there. I don't know if you have it highlighted or not, where I just
This
want to
one,
point out, yeah, but it's in a different place in the article.
I can get it.
That
I can get it.
okay, it's just the subheading that says the newborn and the fetus are morally equivalent.
Yes, yes, that's right.
And you know what? I would agree. that the fetus and the newborn are morally equivalent.
Yeah.
But just under that, it says they both lack those properties that justify the attribution of a right to life to an individual.
Right.
Well, who determines who determines those properties?
Yeah.
You know, if one of them, as you're saying, if one of them is affordability by the state, right, that would be a tacit property that would never be spoken out loud.
Right. Right. Right.
Uh, but in practical matters, that's the end game,
Yeah.
right? When it comes to the state being involved, it is one of those properties must be, does it make sense monetarily
Right.
to attribute to this person personhood,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Do we recognize their personhood based on what's in our wallet?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah. It's crazy. Do you want me to get that article up still?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I was just gonna quote that, and I would actually say that that plays into our next topic as well. So I'll
Yeah.
refer to that again.
Okay. Yeah. So let's say by some miracle, and I'm gonna cut out these other countries and just talk about America. We're both Americans. That's our context. I know individual states are pushing for it, and have it in some ways, but let's say we sever that connection, and somebody only has their own resources to care for somebody, and let's imagine it's one of those worst case scenarios where they're vegetative, and they're only being fed through a tube, and all those tests where they check for responses and stuff, they're not getting anything, but because of our technology, that person is still able to breathe, and
Yeah.
their body's still able to process the food. So this is like the worst case scenario, and we already said you should be making your law on the worst case scenarios. But let's say you've got it. Um, how far do you? And let's take it. Say we're dealing with a Christian, a devout Christian. It could be you or me even, who are absolutely against euthanasia, completely. But we only make $50,000 a year, and we just used up all our insurance. So
Mm-hmm.
you're a pastor. what, what's your guidance on this?
And I also used to be an insurance agent,
Oh my.
talking to people about end of life things.
Okay.
So,
All right.
man, this is I'm sure you've seen Christmas Vacation, where Chevy Chase hands his son the ball of Christmas lights and says, "Here, Russ, you can work on that." It's like this big knot of
Right.
things, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
And so, the first thing I would say is that there's no simple answer to this. These are, like you said, let's say it's a Christian family that is very well meaning, that loves. They're not trying to get grandpa's money,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing. Um, I that said, I do think that there are guiding principles that can help that individual family um, make those decisions. Um, and like you said, with your daughter, it's better if you think about these things ahead of time,
Mm-hmm. Right.
outside of the heat of the moment and the pressure and the thing. So this is the insurance agent in me. I would always encourage people to wrestle with these questions individually and with your loved ones, uh, thoroughly, and I would argue biblically, with one another, and try to arrive at some things to relieve your caregivers and loved ones of having to make those decisions in the moment.
Sure.
That's an agonizing thing.
Yeah.
So just some of those principles, that I guess maybe as a pastor I can speak as a Christian. Um, I would say, as best as you can, um, come from a biblical framework on these end of life things, in helping someone die well versus biblical or versus secular frameworks on how to do that.
Can, I think I actually kind of lost the. Could you just say that whole thing over again? About
Yeah. So
yeah. Go
about
ahead.
which part?
Well, I didn't hear or comprehend
Are you there?
the two sentences about dying well. Like I couldn't tell from what you were saying if that was good or bad.
Are you there?
I'm here. I can see you. I can see you. I can hear you.
Are you there?
Let me see if can I be heard? Yeah. I'm gonna send him a message. He's. Let me just tell him on Messenger here.
Yeah, it's you said you can still see and hear me.
Yeah.
Everything's frozen on my screen. Send me a message and give me a thumbs up or something, and I'll just keep talking. Close it and restart. Let me try that. I apologize to you and your audience. I don't know what
So this is
is the
what
deal
happens. He
there.
started out being
Just a
blurry,
moment.
and just the lack of professionalism. I can say these
Hmm.
things because he's not there. Actually, he's looking a lot more clear now. And somehow we lost him.
I clicked and tried to get back in, and that did not happen. Oh, here I am.
Are you back?
Apparently so.
Okay. All right.
Great. All
Hold on
right.
a minute. I'm waiting. Okay, you are back.
Okay.
Wow. I don't know. While you couldn't hear me, I complained about your lack of professionalism again.
Oh, good. Good.
But
Good.
but I caught that super fast. Like I could tell that you were going. Like like what is this about dying well? Is it good or bad? Like like I could tell that we were missing words or something. So
So strange.
I think you were talking about uh,
Yeah, just some principles to keep in mind.
right, but you said we
Yeah.
should not be like this. We should be
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah. Just our goal is to help someone die with dignity and die well. Just be sure to begin and have the a biblical Christian framework guiding you, as opposed to secular frameworks guiding you in approaching how to do that.
Okay.
Was where I was going. Some other principles to keep in mind: that life is a sacred thing, and so what you're doing in these situations is holy, and should be treated as such. That the life that you're talking about has intrinsic value and dignity. I would urge to focus less. And here's where it starts to get a little tricky, but to focus less on quality of life, which can be so uh, fuzzy. It's a fuzzy term and kind of nebulous and tough to grasp. Instead, focus on value of life
Mm,
as endowed by its the creator of life.
mm-hmm.
And I would say that there's sort of a challenge to self-determinism here. Um, I would argue, are not autonomous over death. We should not be, just like we're not autonomous over life. Um, so I would approach it. I would point people to 1 Corinthians 6:19-20 on that. Um, I would say that both assisted suicide and sort of passive euthanasia
Mm-hmm.
are unbiblical. So you talked about like with the LCP, the London path, that one of the critiques of it was that I read in the article that you sent was, or at the research that I did on it was, no, it was an article. You sent me an article on that, didn't you?
No, not on that.
Um, oh, okay. So I read an article. It didn't come from you.
Yeah.
But anyway, one of the critiques of it was that families were complaining that there was a hastening of death.
Right.
That's it's a very crucial distinction to make, the hastening of death versus uh, allowing someone to die.
Yeah.
There is a distinct difference in that. And I would argue that withholding normal means of sustaining life is hastening death. So things like, if the body is still receiving food, we can get down into real practical things here. Sometimes the body just will no longer receive nutrition by any means. There's
Mm-hmm.
really nothing you can do about that. But if the body's receiving food, feed it, feed that person, keep them hydrated. I mean, I don't know a human being alive who would not die if we did not eat or drink.
Right. Right.
So that's important to keep in
Yeah.
mind. Food and water are not extraordinary means.
Right. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, yeah. So I think and I can keep going, but
Yeah.
if there's
Well,
anything in there you want to
I
talk
think
about.
what we could do is it's worth having you back, especially since you've thought so well on it. And you sent me a document that you wrote on it, but I didn't have a chance to review it. I
All
think
good.
I think we could. I mean, I think it's worth having a conversation just on that.
Mm,
But I think my own hesitation, besides the fact that there are fewer and fewer Christians in the country, every day. We're not the ones who are going to be able to set these laws, but we can maybe influence the conversation. And I'm sensitive to the just the basic objection, which I don't know if it's secular or not. Like, if you just don't got the money, like you literally, like, do you mortgage the house? Do you sell all the cars? Do you tell
mm,
your kids, I'm sorry, you can't go to, college days are done? And meanwhile, the person that you're talking about is lying there with a tube, and you get no senses necessarily, whatever.
mm,
Um, I because we are in some ways, I think, our technological successes have
yes, I would
created
agree.
these ethical dilemmas
Hmm.
that it's not out of the ordinary. These are
Hmm.
not worst case scenario questions. Like, it's not out of the ordinary for people to find them in situations where,
Hmm.
well, for whatever it is, um, they don't have the resources. And your alternative is to run out of resources as an individual,
Sure.
or get connected with the state, and it has its own interests.
Hmm.
So I don't even know if you want to even try to to answer that, or offer an answer to
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I would say just and this would entail a longer conversation, but um, I would say a few things. Just from someone who leans pretty hard libertarian,
Yeah.
politically, I wouldn't turn to the state for that help unless I had to.
Yeah. Right.
Like you said, if, I don't want the state making those kinds of decisions for my family and me.
Yeah.
Um, and hopefully, I could turn to the church. I think this is where the church should be doing things.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is where the church can really love families well. And then lastly, I would say on that, and we can explore any and all more if you'd like, that extraordinary means tend to be the most expensive things, right? So keeping someone fed with a tube even is not super expensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Hydration isn't as expensive. You can do that in home. You don't even
Right.
have to do that in the hospital. So you can, I think, if you can avoid if there's a real barrier to what we may call extraordinary means, even if your personal opinion, maybe respirator is extraordinary means, um, at least I think in a home setting, you can provide normal means,
Right.
food and nourishment.
Yep.
And I do think one more thing I'll add from a Christian perspective, Anthony. I think it's important to also realize in balance of all of these things that from a Christian perspective, death is not the end.
Right. That's right. Yep.
And so clutching life in an unnecessary way um, is also, I would say, another ditch that we could fall into.
Yeah.
Um, that is so we need to have a, again, that's why I stress a biblical view
Yeah.
of dying, just as we try to have a biblical view of
Right.
living.
So the problem here, the problem is so we have extremes on both sides that we
Mm-hmm.
want to avoid. And so I think what we as Christians would have to say in response to that is that a person who has attempted to be well grounded in their faith and has wrestled with these issues and is now in that situation must be allowed some grace
Yes, yes, I agree.
in
Yep,
whichever however it goes. You know, however it goes, if it's the person we're talking about, they agonized over it, right?
yes, yep,
Um, and finding the actual right way is the right way. Just it might not be something you can chart through like a
right,
ship going through the storms. I
right,
mean, you just
yeah.
there's no map.
There's a great book that I would recommend called "How Should We Then Die?"
Oh, interesting.
Kind of a turn of the phrase off of Francis Schaeffer's book, "How
Yeah.
Should We Then Live?" And it's written by a doctor, and she has specialized in her career on end of life things, and I believe she threads that needle very well.
Okay.
She's compassionate, she's clear, she's biblical, she's scientific, she's professional, and she's very even handed, I believe,
Okay.
in that book. So, yeah, I agree that there needs to be room for someone who says, I want to honor God. And based on wrestling with this issue, agonizing before the Lord, as as clear as I can be in my conscience before Him, I think this is the best thing to do. Then I believe there's grace for us
Yeah. Yeah.
as finite creatures wrestling with
Right.
truly infinite things, you
Yeah.
know.
So I'm gonna make a last comment for you that you can respond to before we uh, wind it down. But we've both mentioned the the sophistication of the technology that has created these issues. But it's also worth noting that our technology has also advanced with palliative care
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
hospices are
Yes.
have really um, improved.
Mm-hmm.
They're not like asylums like they used to be.
Right. Right.
So it's sort of like a counterbalance to the worst case scenario thing. Well, worst case scenario or not, even if the technology is such that you're in this situation, there's a very good reason to believe that if you're worried that that person is suffering, that we have an answer for that. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yes.
accessible,
Yep.
it's not
Yep.
hard to reach. It's not great. It's not by any means foolproof, you know, or anything like that. There's no magic bullet in all of it. But it's not necessarily an either or in a lot of these situations. I mean, you're not saying, yeah, they're going to stay alive and suffer, and I'm just going to have to, you know, hey, life is sacred, so suffer right to the end. No,
Right.
there is a way to alleviate that suffering without
Yes.
ending the life
Yes.
in a lot of
Yeah.
cases.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I we are blessed to live when and where we do,
Yeah, right.
for many reasons, but that's one of them. Yeah, I would just say, and again, I've been with lots of families in hospice situations, and it is terribly difficult and sad for everyone involved. But again, I think, like you said, as long as palliative care doesn't move over into hastening death,
Yeah.
as overdosing on morphine and things like that
Right.
can be done, then I think, man, palliative care and hospices are and they're wonderful. They're a gift.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we're definitely going to have to bring you back, even though your camera was out of focus. For
I
it,
have, yeah.
it's in focus now.
The Murphy is strong with me,
Yeah,
Anthony.
it was
Yeah.
fine,
So
and I think that having a more in depth conversation on that will be what some people need to hear. We also didn't talk about Gene Hackman,
oh no, we did not, did we? Yeah.
which sounds to me a lot like one of these scenarios, although we don't quite know yet.
Yeah, it seems something is afoot there, maybe.
Yeah, so that kind of is out there for something to talk about. Um, so we have more to talk about, is what I'm saying, and we'll have to do it again. So
Yeah, I'd love to.
thank you for being here. I don't see any questions or comments, even though I've solicited them. Um, I'm just gonna say a few more words, and I'm not gonna turn you off this time because I don't think you can hear me then, right?
If I turn you off, no, or if you turn me off, I cannot. That's right.
Right. So you just sit there quietly for a minute, okay?
I will.
All right.
Yes.
Just sort of move that down. Okay, so we're wrapping this up completely. I got just a couple minutes left. Um, I didn't really take a time today to talk about what the sort of the mission of this podcast is, so I'm just gonna mention it. One of the things that I want to do is I want to connect with people that I don't really ever talk to or know very well, or I've known them for a long time, but there's distance between us. So Terry and I have actually known each other for a while. We worked that out last time. But if you're watching this, even if you're an absolute complete stranger, even if you have no expertise on nothing, even like any of that, you can be a guest on this. We'll find something that we can talk about. Um, it's just, I feel like we live in such a disconnected era, and technology has not met the promise of bridging relationships, I don't think. And if it's ever going to, it has to be done intentionally. We have to proactively do it. So yeah, as long as you're not a psycho, which I will be able to quickly detect, you can be a guest on this show, and I welcome it. So find us on X, send us a just message there. The other thing that we don't do is we don't focus specifically on politics, even though a lot of there's obviously a lot of political relevance to it. I mean, we could talk about politics. If it ends up talking about politics, then we do, but we don't start there. And that's very deliberate because I don't want to be captive to the narrative of the day. I want to be captain of my own mind, and I want to decide what I'm going to think about today. And that's why all of our topics, they're that we're pulling things from the past, at least a few months in the past or whatever, so that we're taking at least some time out of the day to suck ourselves out of the daily rage and into whatever we think is there's a word, edifying. Yes, edifying. Um, and then lastly, I'll just say, at this point, we don't have any Patreon or anything like that. I don't know if I ever really want to. I'm, obviously, somewhere along the lines, everyone wants to get paid, whatever. But just about every time that we do this, I'm a publisher. I publish about 25 authors and more than 300 books at this point that are out there, one way or the other. So if you like what we're doing, all I ask you to do is look at the book we're promoting. This time it's this one, which we publish, Allowing the Destruction of Life Unworthy of Life. Go out and buy 1,000 of them. A very small ask. And then after you've bought 1,000 of those, um, go buy 1,000 of one of the other books. And then we don't have to do Patreon. We don't have to do subscriptions or anything like that. We can just be supported in a good old fashioned, healthy kind of way. So I'm gonna say one last thing. This book, I told you how that I'm proud of it because I feel like I offered a service with it. I had the opportunity in 2016, I think, to visit the Holocaust Museum in Washington D.C. Um, and you might not know this, but the Holocaust Museum has above it a giant library that is open to the public. And it has just about anything that you could ever ask for um, in terms of resources if you wanted to research the Holocaust. So I went up there. It was it's open to the public, but hardly anyone uses it. So when I asked about it, the guy was like shocked, like the staffer, and it's like tucked away. The entrance to it's like tucked away. So like not like it's like Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark kind of entryway to this place. So I went up there and I thought to myself, if any place in the world has an English version translation of this book, it's going to be the Holocaust Museum in Washington D.C. And they had none.
Wow.
They had none. They looked for me, and at that time, at least, there wasn't one. So I made a donation, and so now there is one, and it's this book. I don't know if they put it on their shelf or not, but so every now and then, just sitting here plugging away on a keyboard has the opportunity to do something special, and that's one of my few success stories that I can point to in that regard. So that's it. Go buy the book. Terry, thank you for being with us again tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm gonna officially turn you off.
Sounds good. Take care, Anthony.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Okay. Now the part where I have to figure out how to do this without ending the stream prematurely. We'll stop the recording. Maybe if I just sit here for a minute and just stare. There's got to be a better way to do it. Goodbye.